Anong panig ka ba talaga? Malinaw kung nasaan ako. Nasa panig tayo ng mga sinasagadang lahat para iraos ang sarili, ang pamilya, ang kapwa mula sa pandemyang ito. Inihahain ko ang aking sarili bilang kandidato sa pagkapangulo sa halalan ng 2022.
Today, the Philippines faces one of the greatest tests in its history. The global pandemic has raced through our country, destroying the lives of people, of families, of entire communities. That is why I am today announcing my intention to run for the presidency of the Philippines in the upcoming May 2022 election.
Good day, good evening, good afternoon, good night. Hello, so today we're gonna be talking about two candidates that are currently running for presidential seat of the Philippines. And no, we're not gonna be talking about a man who looks like his own art gallery of tattoos. We're gonna be talking about two very well-known candidates that I'm sure most of you may know if you're Filipino. That's right, we're gonna be talking about candidates Leni Robredo, also known as the Lugaw Queen, who literally sent a call to arms for giving free lugaw, also known as the mother of all, and of course, one of her rivals, namely Bongbong Marcos, also known as BBM. And our main topics for today are the good and the bad of those candidates.
The information we have is close to accurate as possible, so do bear in mind that some information talked about in this video may be wrong. Anyways, I'll switch the mic over to my co-presenter, Cyril Pio, who will be discussing their good traits, and after that it will be Maisel Cabas, who will be discussing their really bad traits.
Before we begin, I'd like everyone to try and think of what good things you can think of the two candidates. After that, think of the bad traits they have. Have you thought of them? If you have, then hopefully you'll have some idea as to what we're about to talk about. Anyways, take it away, Pio.
It's my turn. So, for starters, let's talk about Leni Robredo. Currently, her plans as a candidate are boiled down to controlling the situation of the pandemic that's still happening. Essentially, using a set budget for healthcare facilities and the like. And all in all, her main priority is people's health, so that's nice. Moving on. Another plan is to essentially, eradicate hunger, or rather, essentially fix the food crisis because of the pandemic. And since we're a nation that's essentially smack dab almost at the middle of the equator, basically close to it, and yeah, you're basically living in the third layer of hell, maybe fourth if you're living in Mindanao. But yeah, since we're close to it, the equator, droughts happen often in the summer months, and even sometimes in the late spring. So overall, she's willing to invest heavily in the agriculture sectors of our nation, so that's well and good. Other than those two, we have the rising unemployment rate, which she's gonna create jobs for. Talk about collaborating with China and how she's gonna deal with the old territorial dispute over the West Philippine Sea, which is essentially that has been gone on long for who knows when it started. And in another statement, she's willing to cooperate with independent and foreign policy to oppose of having to gain favors over other certain countries. Now, Now, I don't know what those countries are, but we'll move on. But, so, our overall plan is to get the economy back up and running again, and to essentially murder the heck out of the pandemic we have currently in this day and age, and essentially eliminating the virus. That's well and good. And of course, that will take some time. Well, the virus can grow other strands from the original, patient zero, so that will take a bit more years until medicine can be developed in order to fight the new strands that are being developed by the virus. But yeah, that's her key goals and her main obstacle she's willing to tackle in order for the nation to prosper. She had also mentioned she would be giving free college scholarships, though it has yet to be confirmed, since this is just information just from hearsay. So yeah. To BBM, the big bold man, or Bongbong Marcos. He says he's willing to try and unifying the leadership of the country that has lacked for almost a few years since Duterte's term, but essentially he wants to return a form of leadership since the pandemic had started, as he formed a party called the PFP, or the Federal Party of the Philippines, where in this party we still have no clue other than it helps form their central goal to their unity campaign for the Philippines. Though he did create a response program for the pandemic called Jab to Job, where in literal context the pandemic gets jabbed, and once it's finished, people can turn to recreating or reforming their businesses again, as well as getting their jobs back, as in the late 21st century. So yeah. In other news, he did also create another program called the National Education Portal, wherein it creates an online platform from the government IT experts to where students and teachers can use it for education and for public and private schools to use, essentially almost fixing the problem of education children are facing in the 21st century. But though, with the current technology that we have, that may as well be somewhat of a hard obstacle to tackle in. So, in late news, yes, he is also strong-arming the Build program that the current President Duterte is trying to release, as this may include strengthening the internet connection and of course support telecommunication companies for supporting people and as well as their livelihoods in online businesses and such. So yeah, to summarize the rest of his plans, he will be creating jobs in businesses, in agriculture, tourism, and infrastructure. Later on will be public services, somewhat of creating and improving transportation. That's essentially self-explanatory. And yeah, that's about it for the two's current plans for the up-and-coming elections and debates, where one openly shares her ideas and plans for the Filipino public, while the other somewhat keeps his plans in a bit of a secretive way, or doesn't really publicly releases his plans for the up-and-coming elections. Anyways, I think I've rambled long enough here. It's time for our friend Maisel to quickly move on to the bad side of these candidates. But before, here's a quick sponsor. Not actually sponsored.
share the feeling.
Greetings! So we're now at the point of the video where we will be discussing about some of the downsides of these two candidates. Of course, this video will have no biases, so with that, hopefully you may understand that this video is just for sharing some information about them. First, let's dig into Leni Robredo. She never really had any intention to run for president. She was always aiming for the VP role, yet some sources say she had the feeling that he never had the right to take the role as a vice president, and so she's now running for president also because she wants to stop the Marcos legacy to continue. Here's another tidbit of information, where during her rallies and interviews, she always states insulting comments and degradation from other presidential candidates. This may be due to the fact she's just trying to make herself good to the public, so this may be a reason on why she's throwing out hate comments like on Twitter. Here's a terrible idea. Would you demolish the NTF-ELCAC, essentially a task force that's essentially made to deal with terrorism and communist influences in the nation? Of course not. Why would you? Well, that's her plan, since she fears that the NTF-ELFAC will be used to launch a campaign similar to that of Oplan Tokhang, the government's anti-drug program which led to the killings of thousands of drug suspects. Though her plan seems noble, if the task force is disbanded, then terrorism from the south would continue, including the hidden communist parties that are currently not in the public. To summarize the rest, how she's tolerating her toxic supporters and cannot campaign without mentioning other candidates, which seems like she is dividing people instead of uniting them. That also includes cancel culture supporters. How she's against war on drugs due to how she intends to rehabilitate drug users as well as drug cartels in the Philippines during her 2017 speech about extrajudicial killings and the war on drugs, with how she states that poverty is the reason on why the war on drugs keeps raging on. Now it's time for the last topic that we will be talking about, and that's the man who has quite the dark past, which is Ferdinand Marcos Jr., also known as Bongbong Marcos. How about we have Robbie to talk about his bad traits?
Hi, I'm your next person to report in this topic. As now, it's time for the last topic we'll be talking about, and that's the man who has quite the dark past. Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr., of course known as Bongbong Marcos. First off, let's state some things here, with him failing to comply with his tax income return around 30 years ago in July 1991, or 5 years after dictator Ferdinand Marcos were ousted from power when the Cory Aquino government assessed that Marcos' son had tax deficiencies of 8,504 pesos. He supposedly did not pay his taxes from 1982 to 1985 while he was vice governor and then governor of Ilocos Norte. Bongbong Marcos was charged in absentia, but he returned to Philippines in October of the same year. Then he was arraigned in December 1991 and he defended himself in trial by passing the buck to his staff. In the question on how he failed to comply with his ITR, his family is taken into question and into court of his family's ill-gotten wealth, as the Marcoses are accused of amassing billions of ill-gotten wealth during their reign, and the Presidential Commission on Good Governance (PCGG) was created precisely to recover assets from the Marcos family and the ousted dictator's cronies. After that would be him essentially being late or barely attending forums and interviews about his campaign, stating that due to the schedules we have already confirmed from the Uniteam's campaign commitments, we are unable to accept this additional engagement at this time, the Marcos camp said. As Marcos also skipped the Jessica Soho presidential interviews and kapisanan ng broadcaster of the Philippines Presidential Forum, the camp also said that if he were to join any forums or debates, it would only lead to bickering with other bets. And finally, the most obvious will be his family's histories, as BBM's father was a bit of dictator that enacted martial law as a justification for his takeover and subsequent authoritarian rule over the entire nation, and of course creating a military regime. But as of today, who knows if BBM would be close to similar to his father's past, as well as if Leni Robredo will continue her controversial streak when it comes to her rallies as well as uniting the nation. Well then, looks like we've reached the end of the video. Hopefully, you like that our group made and prepared and presented. Have a nice day ahead.